Hello and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. I'm Juliet Corbett. I'm an executive coach and strategist, and I work one-to-one with senior leaders, guiding them to find their strategic focus, empower their teams, and regain control over their time.
And I'm Lucy Gower. I'm a facilitator, trainer and coach, and I empower leaders to build their happy, confident and high-performing teams. Today we're going to be talking about what the challenges and opportunities are for being promoted within the same organisation. And this topic links to episode 31, where we talk about being promoted in a new organisation. But actually this topic has come from you, the listeners, and I just want to say at this early on point, if you have topics that you think it would be helpful for us to cover, please get in touch with either Juliet or me, and we add them to our list and we are working through them diligently. We will cover everything that we are asked to cover, so please do get in touch. But being promoted within the same organisation, I know that it has happened to me and there's been some big challenges there. But Juliet, what are the things that you're observing, perhaps from the leaders that you're coaching, about that a great opportunity, but actually really difficult transition?
Yeah, I think it is quite a difficult transition. It's a shift in your own identity as to who you are and your place and your role, your authority within that organization. And also it's a shift to other people's perception of you, because you're not the newcomer coming in making a new impression from scratch. You've kind of not got that benefit of the blank slate where you can kind of embody the new role that you're stepping into. You've got a lot of benefits of the network that you've created within the organization already, and the knowledge that you have of what's happening within the organization, you know, what's going well and what maybe isn't going so well within the organization. But it's tricky. It's really tricky to make that step up. And it's helping leaders to understand how their identity and behavior shifts, then helping them know how to guide others in doing that. I think that's the key part.
There's real pros and cons, isn't there? Because yes, you might know a lot about an organisation, but you don't know a lot about your new place in that organisation because you're not there yet, and you kind of come with a lot of baggage that you need to unlearn in order to be able to step into a different role, and often a role up a hierarchy of an organisation where your focus is more strategic and less tactical. But for me, when I got promoted up, my biggest light bulb moment was when we would go for a drink after work, and I was part of the team and we'd all go out together, and then I became a manager of some of the people that I was peers of, and we went to the pub, but I was expected to fly the first round and then I was expected to go home. And that's the shift.
And did you know that was the expectation because that had been role modelled by the person who was previously in your role?
No.
Or you just felt
No.
that imperceptible shift?
Felt it.
Interesting. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It was awkward and upsetting, like, to be completely honest.
That's really interesting. So reflecting back on my career, actually I've never done it because I've worked in small teams, small organizations. Actually, there's never really been an opportunity to step up within that organization. So I've always had to move to another organization, sometimes not that far away. So from one Cambridge college to another, for example. So, you know, there's still some element of the network that remains the same. And repositioning how your role in that wider network might be an element of that I have navigated myself. But no, I'm really interested to hear from your personal perspective how that is.
Well, yeah, I can share some personal perspective, and I can share some how I help leaders do this. But I think in my research for this episode, one of the things that I kept coming across was how this stage of career of being promoted from being a practitioner to a leader. So you're really good at being a practitioner, and then the next step is to be promoted to lead people, which often takes you away from the practice that you're doing to lead people, often without adequate support, is one of the most stressful career changes that people seem to go
Yeah.
through. And the level of support and how you manage yourself in doing that is pretty critical to how that works out or not. And I think the other thing that I'll just say really
Mhm.
quickly, otherwise I'm not going to remember it, is often we're in hierarchies where that's the progression.
Mhm.
But actually, sometimes moving away from what you love and are brilliant at, the practitioner bit, to be a leader, isn't necessarily the right move. And you only discover that by doing it.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I find interesting is that I've had quite a lot of conversations with people in different sectors who have explained to me this fact that within their career, their sector, it's happened conversations with law partners just a couple of nights ago, conversations with heads within schools, conversations with academics. In a lot of these, and engineering firms as well, actually. So in a lot of these sectors, they think that it's unusual that you stop doing and you start leading, but actually it's common across almost every sector has this transition point. And so while we
Yeah.
might be using examples from particular sectors, I think it is a common theme across all different sectors that you make
Yeah.
this transition. And similarly, across many of those sectors, we do not yet have, I'm saying yet because I'm hoping we're going to fix it at some point, but we do not
Uh-huh.
yet often have a clear career path to become more senior and more recognized, and yet not to have to take on active line management and active leadership to become almost
Yes.
like a more like a recognized expert where you can keep hands on
Yeah.
and play an increasingly important role in the decision making of the organization. It does happen in some cases, but those are the
Yes.
exceptions rather than the norm.
Absolutely. And that often involves one-to-one
Yeah,
negotiation, rather it's totally the exception
yeah,
rather than
yeah.
the rule.
So let's dive into some of the detail. What are the key
Mm.
things, maybe starting with ourselves, as we're stepping up and we're thinking about our identity, the skill set, it's almost that what got you here won't get you there. That sense of all those behaviors and skill sets and habits that you've practiced and have become really good at operationally, and you need to make this transition internally yourself to
Yeah.
doing things differently.
Mm.
What are the key parts of this that are different, do you think, Lucy?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think, and if this is a mix of me remembering and some of the work that I do with people in this situation, I think that when you get promoted internally, I think that there can be an assumption on, you can make assumptions that you're just going to be at a different desk and you've got a different job title and a different signature on your email, and you make lots of assumptions about how things are going to be the same. And actually, so many of the things that we talked about going into a new organization absolutely apply. Like, don't skip your 90-day things that you're going to do in your new role just because you're still in the same organization. So I think if we're looking to your question, if we're looking at ourselves and all the things that we've done to be successful in this role, you've almost got to make sure that you view it as a completely new role in a completely new organization and approach it
Mm,
in that way in terms of your habits
mm,
and behavior, and be really alert to the assumptions that you're making because you've been in the organization for some amount of time
mm.
beforehand. That would be my first, where my brain goes to first. What about you, Juliet?
Yeah, I mean, my brain always goes to strategy first, as you might know if you've been listening to this podcast,
Of
of course.
course.
So one of the themes that people who I'm working with talk about quite a lot, and I'm known for helping people to become more strategic and less reactive. So maybe they're self-selecting and coming to me
Mm,
because that's what I talk about a lot. But
mhm,
but a
mhm,
lot of them are talking about the transition from being very operationally focused, which in some
mm,
sense needs to be reactive, although you can still be forward thinking operationally, and then elevating out of that to see a bigger picture, to be more strategic, which means lengthening your time horizon, widening the breadth of the issues that you're considering and challenges that you're seeing from beyond your organization in the sector and then beyond wider into the economy and so on, and thinking about making tough choices where there aren't obvious answers. It's not that we're now optimizing an operational process for time efficiency or cost efficiency, where there
mm,
might be one answer, there might not be, but almost inevitably, when you're thinking strategically, you're dealing with tough calls, tough decisions where you're going to have to make a
Yeah.
decision without all the information, without certainty about what's going to happen and how it's going to
Yeah.
go. So it's handling that transition to be able to take on more strategic decisions, more strategic conversations that I find the bit that people talk to me most about that shift. And of course,
Yeah.
it depends where you are in your leadership journey. If you're still fairly early career, then it might be that there's a little shift to becoming slightly more strategic and less operational, but that gets bigger and bigger, that shift, as you go higher and higher up the organization, until finally when you are
Mm.
CEO or managing director, you are really need to be spending almost all of your time looking out and
Yeah.
directing the organization as opposed to
Yeah.
being operational
Yeah.
in your focus.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of that is about how you yourself reframe your
Yeah.
role, and some of it is about how other people view you. And I think that that is the kind of more often than not baggage that you take with you. If you've
Mm,
been part, your peers and your friends, you're now say that you're managing them. There's several things within that. You may or may not know who else went for the role.
mm-hmm,
And my experience is to have one-to-ones with your new team and your colleagues and call that out about how are we going to best work together now that this is my role and this is what it looks like, which is different, and this is your role, and find out who went
mm,
for the role, find out how they're feeling about it, like open up that conversation. Because, and I know from personal experience, when I there was a time when I didn't do this, and there was a conversation that I had with somebody, and I said, I'm surprised you didn't go for this role. And they went, I did. And the tumbleweeds went through, and it was really, really, really awkward. So,
awkward.
I'm a big
Yeah.
believer in like learning by your past mistakes. And if this is you going from being part of a team to managing some of that team, have those one-to-one conversations and be really clear on
Mm,
expectations and how people are feeling and how
mm-hmm.
you're going to work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. And actually, there's some echoes back to some of our previous conversations about preparing for difficult conversations. If you're feeling a bit nervous about doing that, although might not know the answer, or you may know that somebody went for it, but maybe you're not supposed to know at this point that they went for it. So you have to then open up that conversation, maybe listening to that, some of that around being
Mm,
present, being alert to someone's emotional reaction, and knowing that sometimes you need to give people
mm,
time. And so it
mm.
may still be a raw emotion. That doesn't mean it's going to always be feeling that way
Exactly.
for them.
And actually, that's fine that they might feel disappointed that they didn't get it. And
Mm-hmm,
hopefully you've got a good enough relationship that if they're not ready to talk about it, that's okay, but you can come back at another
mm-hmm,
time. The other
mm-hmm.
thing that I've just thought about in this kind of stepping up is that I've definitely seen it in organizations where you've been promoted into the new role, but you're still doing the old role, and there's this kind of um
Yes.
not a very good transition. And my advice around that is have a really clear start date and a really clear finish date for the role that you were doing before. So you can actually transition. Because if you're trying
Yeah.
to wear managing the team hat, but still doing your tactical bit of your tactical job hat,
Yeah.
that's a tough path to
Yes.
tread. When what we're saying here is, how you have to think differently about yourself to elevate yourself to that different status position. You can't do it if you're
Mm-hmm.
wearing two hats at the same time.
Yes, and this is where some really good negotiation needs to happen. So
Yeah.
sometimes it may be that there is a recruitment process that needs to happen that won't be instantaneous, which means that yes, maybe you do need to wear two hats for a little while, if that is the reality. Okay. But then it's helping a negotiation process to happen, which is really clear on, okay, given that that is actually not possible
Mm,
to do two roles well,
mm,
therefore, what are we going to pause? What are we going to, stop
exactly.
doing entirely? What is the most important thing that you do need me to do? So that there's a clear understanding that given the circumstances are less than ideal, given it is not possible to do two roles, there's a
Mm,
negotiated conversation about
exactly.
actually what the priorities are. And then, as you said, always a clear start finish date when that is possible based on
Yeah.
recruitment timelines and so on.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So, what about helping others to shift the way they think of you, the way they see you? Because some of that starts to happen automatically as you shift your
Mm,
identity. But what are the ways that
yeah.
we can guide others to see that this is a shift, a transition?
So I think some of that happens in the one-to-ones that I've talked about.
Mm,
Have one-to-ones with your team where you're clear on your roles and responsibilities and you're clear on theirs. I think some of that happens through how you choose to work together and how you choose to lead, and perhaps being even more deliberate about the things you're not going to do.
hmm hmm
And that can be really hard if you used to be a practitioner and you know a lot of the answers. It's really leading your team so that they can suggest the answers and you can support them. And I think it's something around letting go of control of some of those things that are not part of your job anymore. So getting really good at delegating, maybe doing a bit of training or getting some coaching or mentoring
hmm
around that. So there's one-to-ones and leading by example as you mean to go on are the things that spring to mind most
mm.
immediately for me.
Yeah,
What about you,
yeah, definitely.
Juliet?
Yeah, it's setting others' expectations with clarity, I think. So as much as you might be learning in the
Mm,
first 90 days, let's say, what it is that you want to be focusing on in that role. And you need to be open to the fact that you might see new things, different things from a different perspective, and have
mm.
access to different information now that you're in a
Yeah,
slightly more senior role than you perhaps had previously. So there's a flexibility in that, but at the same time, being able to communicate with real clarity to the people that you're leading what you will and won't
yeah,
continue doing from your previous role,
yeah,
um, so that even if some of that, you know, over the next 3 months, this is the clarity, and we'll review it again as we learn more and as we see how things are going. But I think that the difficulty comes when there's a lack of confidence to give things really clear boundaries and make really clear decisions.
yeah.
And when it's all a bit woolly,
Yeah. And some
that's where
of
the
that,
misunderstandings
yeah, I
happen.
agree. And some of that might be finding
Mm.
your way, a bit of
Mm.
trial and error, but also in that we're talking about managing your team, but actually your senior leaders, if they're used to you being the practitioner, go and ask Lucy, she'll know how to do that. And then you're in a different role
Mm.
where actually there's
Mm-hmm.
a new Lucy who is
Mm-hmm.
doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to train upwards as well as downwards in terms of your
Agreed.
barriers. And
Yeah.
that's arguably harder, can be harder than kind of stepping up to manage
Yeah.
your peers.
Yes. Changing all those habits. It's interesting
Yeah,
because at least a majority of those more senior stakeholders wanted you to be promoted because there's a sense that they chose you
yeah,
in whatever process that promotion occurred in. Um, so you've got their support, but
sure.
that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that they actually understand which emails they need to be CCing you into
Yeah,
still, who
yeah,
actually they're going to
yeah,
be allocating tasks to. And actually, this did happen early on, although it wasn't due to a promotion shift. It was a shift of who was doing what within a team while I was staying the same level.
yeah,
Um, but there was a hesitancy that I had of, oh, okay, but if my director's telling me to do something, it's because he's telling me to do something.
yeah,
And then I was, oh, no, 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 no. Actually, he's telling the role that I used to have, who happened, he forgot that I moved
yeah,
in sideways into a different role. Um, Actually, it's absolutely fine for me to say, actually, that needs to be so and so now,
yeah,
because that's their role. And I don't necessarily need to inform him constantly. I can just pass it on. And eventually, the fact he's always going to get emails from the other person, he
yeah,
learns not to keep
yeah,
coming to me. But there's that differential between knowing you've got that support from higher up and knowing that you still need to cultivate those new habits.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a lack of support, like you say, is it? It's just that people
Mm.
are into habits. And so I suppose it comes
Yeah.
back to at the very beginning, absolute clarity on what your role is and therefore
Yeah.
the tasks that you will do within that and manage those relationships and expectations up,
Mm.
down, and across so
Mm-hmm.
that everybody is clear. And that can also
Yeah.
help it to be more clear in your own mind too. And sometimes those
Yeah.
conversations around like this is my role, this is your role, sparks specific conversation. So that project, what's your role in that now, which can be helpful for you
Mm-hmm.
as much as it is for the other person to talk that out
Yeah.
together.
Anything that gets clarity.
Yeah,
I mean, basically, any organization is a collection of humans with their own thought process and information they hold, and
Mm,
unless they start talking and sharing and getting that shared understanding, it's true even when there isn't a promotion or change, but it's even more so when you're shifting your
yeah,
role within that organization, definitely.
yeah,
And the other one, actually, and we talked about this a little bit last time about speaking up in meetings, but being conscious about your role in those meetings is probably a really good thought process to go through as well, because those set piece team catch up meetings, the meeting where you're going to be in new senior leadership team meetings, for example,
mm,
understanding what role you want to play in each of those groups and being really clear in your mind,
mm,
especially if
mm,
there's any nervousness around stepping up into some of the more senior conversations that you might now be having. It's really good to have clarity about what it is
yeah,
that you want to communicate, or the role you want to play
yeah.
in that group.
And that
Yeah.
brings me round to um, what your support network needs to look like now as you're stepping up.
Mm.
So this is a can be a pivotal and difficult part in a career path. Often, not always, but often in my experience, when people step up to a leadership role, there isn't necessarily always, you can't guarantee that there's adequate support. Lots of organisations are great at
Mm-hmm.
this. Lots of
Mm-hmm.
organisations
Mm-hmm.
are not so great at this because I think there's an assumption, oh, this person's excellent at being a practitioner. They'll be a wonderful manager without
Yeah.
the training
Yeah.
needed. So what it's about coming back to asking for help and asking for what you need. And you might not know what you need
Mm.
until you stumble across it actually in this situation. But building a network of peer support, mentor, coaches, whatever it looks like for you,
Mm.
depending on the resource that you have, is what I absolutely recommend. And anybody listening who's taking their first leadership step up, I would really suggest that you get a coach or a mentor
Yeah.
from the outset
Yeah.
because you will encounter things that you didn't realize were things that you would need to deal with. And you get too
Mm-hmm.
many of those in a short space of time, and it can really put a dent in your confidence. And
Mm.
you need to keep your confidence high to perform at
Yeah,
your best.
definitely. Definitely. And some of the best coaching engagements that I've had around this transition have a couple of coaching sessions before the transition starts,
Mm,
because actually then it's a lot about self-awareness, understanding how you deal with stress, how you like to lead, your core values, things that you might have
mm,
found tricky, in your previous kind of roles in your career. And then when you actually are promoted into that new role, then it means that the coach and you already know each other quite well.
yeah,
You've unearthed a few things that might be things you need to talk about, to do with beliefs or
yeah,
mindsets. And then that coaching is also live as you navigate that first 3 to 6 months
yeah,
of the new role, which means that the conversations, from my experience, often shift from um, more deep conversations about you and who you are into, well, this happened and I'm not sure what to do about it, or
yeah,
this happened, I did this, but I'm reflecting that maybe I could have handled that better.
yeah,
So it's almost like an in the moment live conversation about specifics that
yeah,
are occurring in
yeah,
that new role.
yeah.
So I find that time frame, depending on the notice you have before
Mm,
you're stepping up, that time frame can work really well to have a bit of coaching before and then through.
yeah, completely agree.
And then the other thing I'd say is that some of this, it's like a lot of learning's on the job. 70% of learning's on the job. 20% is through social learning. This is coaching, that kind of thing. But 10% is also through um, formal training, and that can include watching informational videos and so
Mm,
on. The quality of, I mean, YouTube's fine, TEDx is good, but the quality is variable generally out there on the wild internet. And so I think what you provide, Lucy, in your Lucidity network is a beautifully curated section where you're not going to waste time listening to the 5 different ways of doing something. You're going to actually get to the point of, these are the key things you need to be
exactly,
looking at and focusing on. So yeah, I'd highly
exactly.
recommend. It's a good moment to be engaging in that as well.
I completely agree. And there's your peer support within there too, people who are going through it with you or
Yeah,
people that have already
yeah,
done it. Um, and it's a very friendly environment and
yeah,
generous with
definitely.
help and support.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got my eye on the clock, but there's one more thing that I think is really
Mm,
important to say because I keep coming
mm,
back to this piece around you've been a colleague with others and then you're moving away from it and how difficult and awkward that can feel at first. And if you were in a team and you were best buddies with somebody and now you're managing the whole team, there's something really important about fairness and being seen to be fair. And people will be
mm.
looking out for you favouring your best buddy and creating that level playing field and making sure that you're treating everybody the same and um you almost have to be more visual and deliberate about that than you would in a slightly different scenario, or if you didn't have like a
Yeah.
best mate within the team. And that best mate dynamic needs to, in my view, needs to shift a little bit too.
Yeah.
And that might take a little bit of time to figure out what that looks like. I'm not saying that you can't be really good friends with your manager, but it's something to be really mindful of,
Yeah.
and what that looks like and how that makes the team dynamic feel.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that you map up over time, but to be
Mm,
super aware of confidentiality. I mean, it's so obvious, I almost don't
yeah,
need to say it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's absolutely critical because any question from above, for the more senior people above you, that you are actually holding confidentiality of the information that you now have access to, even though your best bud is someone who's more junior in the team and wouldn't normally have access to that same information.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about being open
Mm,
with people, isn't it? And
yeah,
saying, look, this is what I'm doing and why. This is why our relationship might need to shift and change.
yeah,
What do you think?
yeah.
And then being really clear. And the other thing that part of that I wonder about is when you become more senior, one of the things that can happen is even if it's not your friendships that influence that, it's because you were running one department, you know that department well, you know the people well, but you know that department really, really well. And as you then step up to run multiple departments, it's not too much to do with the one-to-one friendships that might question the fairness,
Hmm.
but you want to make sure that you've got an appropriate level of understanding of the other departments, which wouldn't be the same amount of
Yeah.
detail. So you might know the department that you've come from really well. So it's important that you have an appropriate level of detail about the new departments you're leading, but you
Mm,
won't need all the operational detail. And then being seen to be fair across the different departments that you're leading is critically important. And just
mm.
doing that with real intention
Yeah.
and kind of a conscious emphasis on that to make sure you're not accidentally slipping into giving the impression, or indeed being slightly unfair, giving more time or attention
Yeah.
to your previous
Or
department that you were
or
in.
or making the previous department feel like they're micromanaged. And how come the other department isn't because you don't
Yeah,
know so much about it? And I think that
yeah,
that can feel like your safety zone. You've come from that department, you know it really well. It can be really easy to keep in your safety zone rather than step up and
mm-hmm.
perhaps feel a bit uncomfortable about areas that you're taking on that you know less about.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Lots to navigate in here. I'm
Yeah.
noticing all of the crossovers to actually a lot of our previous episodes. You mentioned asking for help, then we've got an
Yeah.
episode on that as well. We've obviously mentioned some of the other ones around um, being promoted into a new role in a new organization. We've got
Yeah. That
unlearning, how to
yeah.
unlearn things. There's a lot of episodes that we can link to in the
Yeah.
episode
And
notes
if you're
here.
listening to this and you haven't listened to promotion in a new organization, I really suggest that you listen to that one as well. They
Yeah,
sit together.
yeah, definitely. I think pretty much all of that applies in this circumstance.
Yeah.
You've just got a little bit of extra navigation to be doing in there around the relationships as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So we really love to hear your feedback. We really love to hear your stories of stepping up in organizations and what's getting in your way right now to making
Yeah.
that work really well. And we can see whether we can weave that into a future episode, can't we, Lucy?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, we do this
Fantastic.
for you, so let us know what you need.
Yes. Excellent. Any last thought that you'd like people to take away?
I think if I'm going to do a quick three things to think about if this is you stepping
Mm,
up, ask for help. Ask for help before you need it. Build your networks. Take a look at the Lucidity network that can help you. Your
yeah.
one-to-ones and those open conversations about how are we going to work together now. And I think setting boundaries that may feel difficult because you're in the same organization, but it is an opportunity to regroup on those boundaries and what you say no to. And certainly one of those no's is doing your old job at the same time that you're doing your new job.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about you, Juliet?
Yeah. So I would say generally it's about being intentional. It's about
Mm,
understanding that this is an intentional transition. And like any transition, don't expect it all to go smoothly. I mean, if it does, wonderful. But
yeah.
it probably won't, and that's okay. We all learn as we go along. And in that spirit, of asking for help, get the support that you need. And if you don't have a budget, that's fine. You'll build the support that you need from
Mm,
the people that you already know by going out there and actively seeking the networks and the support that you need. But if you do have budget, then be really intentional about how you're going to use that and deploy that to support you over this transition.
yeah.
Yeah. Exciting times. It's very exciting to be
Yes, that's it.
promoted and up into leadership for the first time. I'm
Yes,
feeling we've kind of lost that element and we're sounding very serious about it all.
you're
But
so right. So yeah, congratulations on your new role. Enjoy it.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Perfect. All good. Okay, so thank you for spending this time with us today. I'm Juliet Corbett, an executive coach and strategist working one to one with senior leaders.
And I'm Lucy Gower, a facilitator, trainer, and coach, helping leaders develop high performing teams. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with colleagues and help leverage the impact of the quiet leadership revolution.